This Sunday, we'll all know who will be replacing Justin Trudeau as leader of the Liberal Party of Canada and thus Prime Minister. Behind the scenes, the candidates are preparing to take the reins of the country and to be thrown into dealing with a trade war and a possible spring election. Joining me now for an inside look at how the party is preparing for all of this is political strategist Amanda Alvaro. Amanda, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So you know a lot about kind of the political machinations that go on behind the scenes with a leadership convention. So what conversations or what sort of conversations are likely taking place now within the party to ensure that whichever candidate wins is prepared to hit the ground running if they become leader and, of course, eventually Prime Minister?
Well, you can imagine that there's already a bit of a transition taking place. So we have the next 72 hours where Liberals are gearing up for this vote. On Sunday, we'll have a new leader. That leader will become the next Prime Minister. We know that there's a caucus meeting happening on Monday morning where the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, and the new leader will address caucus. And the transition that's happening behind the scenes is really preparing for what will likely be the next federal election. Sources say that we could be in an election within 4 to 6 weeks. So the party is preparing for the funds that are necessary to run ad campaigns, to get candidates up and running. There's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done. But with the Liberals now moving up in the polls, which was unpredictable just a few weeks ago, there's also a real palpable energy and excitement amongst the party to head to the polls.
Yeah, a lot has changed even in the past month or so. So Trudeau has said his official resignation date will be determined by the new leader. He has said he's not going to stick around for a long time as a caretaker leader. But he's also the one, obviously, right now who's leading Canada's response to U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war. So how could all of that affect his actual resignation date?
Well, we expect that the transition will be fairly short. There's a small window in which the opposition, the other parties, are able to put out ads without a spending limit. And the Liberal Party wants to keep that as closed as possible. So you would expect that that transition will be pretty short. The Prime Minister obviously has had a real and important role in these trade negotiations. And I would imagine that that transition will include the Prime Minister, but also the new leader needs to take that seat. He or she needs to be prepared to get into the seat to negotiate with Donald Trump. And with some of the exemptions that allow us for that April 2nd deadline, we're really up against just a few weeks. So you can imagine that the new leader will be getting briefed, will be moving into that chair, and will be at the seat, at the table to negotiate with Donald Trump.
Yeah, so much going on politically right now. And speaking of politics, Amanda, there have been 5 Liberal cabinet ministers who have announced they will not be seeking re-election. So they are Justice Minister Ara Ferrani, International Trade Minister Mary Ng, Rural Development Minister Goody Hutchins, Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan, and former Tourism Minister Soraya Martinez-Ferrada. They're all MPs who will not be running again. So given that, as these prospective leaders kind of look to their potential future cabinets, who will they be eyeing? Who could be at risk of being shuffled out? What do you think the landscape could look like?
So we've heard that if it is a Carney cabinet, that it could be a smaller cabinet. We know that a lot of the current MPs and ministers have lined up behind Mark Carney. So I would expect that you won't see a lot of change. I think that there are some big names like Melanie Joly, Francois-Philippe Champagne, who will likely stay in those portfolios or in the big portfolios. But you can look to some of the endorsements to see who might be in the cabinet. People who have been, loyal supporters of those candidates as they've gone through this leadership bid could likely be big names and people that will be at the table. Then you have somebody like Dominic LeBlanc, who has had a big role negotiating with Donald Trump. I would expect that he will maintain some sort of position where he can continue to have those sustained discussions that are really important on behalf of Canadians.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important to note in this whole process that obviously because this is a Liberal leadership race and not a federal election, only about 120,000 people are voting for the person who will ultimately become the next Prime Minister for however long that is. And this is, of course, since Liberals hold the most seats in the current Parliament. So how do you think all of this will weigh on the next election campaign going forward?
So there's about 400,000 registered liberals. We know that there's about 150,000 today that have verified their identity to vote, but 100,000, 200,000 more could register in time, could verify their identity to vote in time. But listen, I think that any new leader will be seeking the mandate from Canadians. So we expect that that leader will hold the prime minister's chair for just a couple of weeks, maybe even less before an election is called. And that election will take place because they're seeking that mandate to be able to negotiate with the Trump administration, which is one of the top issues that Canadians are facing right now. When you ask Canadians, what are you worried about? This is what they're worried about. And they want a leader who has that strong mandate to go both to the polls and then to represent Canada on the world stage.
All right, well, we'll all be watching on Sunday, that's for sure. Amanda Alvaro, political strategist, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.